Welcome, everyone. I'm Ben Kenny. I'm the MIRA-iGeN study coordinator, and thank you for joining us today. We know that your lives are really busy, so we appreciate you taking the time to be here this afternoon. So we just have a few housekeeping items to cover before we jump into the presentation. So throughout the presentation, only the cameras and microphones of the presenters will be on. If you have any questions at any point during the presentation, you can enter them in the Q&A box, and one of us will respond, and that will be open to you throughout the whole presentation. We'll also have a few activities for you throughout the presentation. We use the platform Mentimeter for these. So when the activity comes up, there will be a QR code you can scan to enter your answers, or you can use the Mentimeter website and enter the code that will be provided on the slide. The information you enter is just to contribute to the presentation. We won't be using that for anything else. We also have Jacqueline Pham here today, who's the communications assistant from MIRA, and she's supporting the webinar today. And she'll be sharing the same information I just shared with you in the chat as well, along with some other important items. So keep an eye on the chat throughout the presentation as well. And I'll repeat the instructions for the Mentimeter once we reach that point in the presentation again. So to start, we'll have our land acknowledgement. And so first, we like to acknowledge that McMaster is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee nations, and within lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. With this acknowledgement, we acknowledge and honor Indigenous rights to govern research involving Indigenous people and lands, and the critical importance of our co-created two-row approach, modeled on the Haudenosaunee Dutch two-row wampum agreement, which will honor Indigenous governance by and relationships with diverse Indigenous communities and lands across what we now call Canada. Sorry. And before we begin the presentation, I'd like to introduce you to the MIRA-iGeN team members who are joining us online today. Doctors Andrea Gonzalez and Parminder Raina are the lead investigators of the study, and will be presenting today along with co-investigators Doctors Divya Joshi and Vanessa Rubeis. We're also pleased to be joined by Dr. Louise Lafortune, who leads the brain health component of the study and will play a key role in advancing this important area of our research. We also have several members of our research team here whose hard work has been essential to recruiting participants and collecting the data that makes this study possible. We're very grateful for their contributions and for their dedication that they bring to the project every day. I'll now turn the presentation over to Dr. Raina, who will discuss the purpose and importance of the MIRA-iGeN study within the context of our rapidly evolving world.
Great, thanks very much, Megan, and welcome to everyone this afternoon. And we are delighted that you have taken part in this study and continue to take part in this study. And that's what we are going to try to showcase, why it's important that we continue to further develop this program of research that can inform policy and clinical practice in the future. In order to carry out a project like this, which is looking at the whole person, you require a team that brings different disciplinary perspective to the types of research questions and measurements we do in the study. And you can see here, I'm not going to read each and every one of those, but it goes from psychology to sociology to biology. So we are truly trying to capture, as we develop further, the spectrum, how cell to society impacts the overall development and aging process. Next, please. It's also important to acknowledge that this MIRA-iGeN is funded by the McMaster Institute for Research and Aging and Labarge Center for Mobility in Aging. And all of this has been made by a generous gift by our donor, Suzanne Labarge, who is the former chancellor of the McMaster University, as well as alumni of the university. She continues to be a big supporter of all the work we do here at McMaster in the aging space, especially the MIRA-iGeN project. Next, please. So today we are actually going to be going through different components of the iGen progress. I'm going to talk about first two, and then Vanessa will come and take on number three, and Divya and Andrea will come at the end to wrap up the presentation. So what I'm going to do is to give you a context. Why do we really need to do this study in relation to how the demographic patterns are changing and what is needed to inform policy and practice in the future? First of all, many of you probably aware of it. Traditionally, Canadian population used to look like a pyramid. There were more younger people at the bottom, fewer people at the top. And since mid-90s, that pattern has started to change. And you can see now in this dynamic figure that it looks like an upside down pyramid. That means there are a growing number of people who are the baby boomers, and the fastest growing age group is 80 plus in the country. And first time in the history of Canada in 2015, we have more people over the age of 65 than we have people under the age of 15. So it creates a intergenerational gap that impacts how the society functions. And that's one of the reasons we are looking at MIRA-iGeN to understand how development and aging process happens. Next, please. And I could do a whole presentation on demographic shifts and what are the important things, but I wanted to highlight a couple of demographic patterns that are playing out in the Canadian context. And it is not just in Canada, but around most of the developed nations, we are seeing more and more of these patterns emerge. If you look at the slide on the top left hand, there is a blue line and a green line. Blue line is from 1981, and the green line is from 2021. What it basically shows, we hear a lot about social isolation and loneliness. And social isolation and loneliness is not just in older people. It actually also happens in younger people. And this slide shows the percent of person age 15 older in private households that are living alone. So a lot of people are living alone, and this trajectory is changing rapidly, and it is happening at all age groups. The slide on the top right-hand side gives you some magnitude of the people living alone, proportion of people age 15 or older in private households in the 2021 census. You can see Canadian averages, the 15% are living alone. Quebec has the highest. Yukon has next highest, but it is all across the country. And it is a pattern that is going to impact how we design services in the future, and including health and social services. The other pattern that is also emerging is that among children aged 0 to 14 in Canada who live with at least one of their grandparents in 2021, this figure shows that 63% live with two parents and at least one grandparent. 7% live with at least one grandparent and without a parent, and 30% live with one parent and at least one grandparent. So there are two types of phenomena that is happening in Canada. One is that the people living alone and how that is going to impact their development and aging process. And then there is this intergenerational, multi-generational households and how that is going to transform the way we develop and age as we get older. And this is not, as I said earlier on, especially the prevalence of one-person household is not unique to Canada. You can see Canada, US, UK, France, Italy, Germany, Japan, they're all in the same boat, some more than others, but everybody is impacted by this. Next, please. Another historic shift, you probably get a sense of what I've already talked about. It is for the first time in human history, up to 4 generations of the same family members are alive at the same time. We don't have it here, and one of the interesting picture that I used to show is of Mick Jagger. His father, Mick Jagger, his son, and his grandchildren and their children, all in one family, living at the same time. And it is not unique to rock stars. It's happening all across our society where 4 generations are living at the same time. Next, please. And the question, which there's multitudes of questions that we could discuss, but we are going to focus on few. And one of those, how these demographic shifts will shape healthy aging in the future. One of that is how we provide care to each other. Next, please. There is this term that is used right now in scientific literature and even in popular literature called grandparent army. We don't have much data in Canada, but some of the UK data shows 9 million grandparents provide childcare, including 3 million who do so regularly. As I said, that Canada lacks these exact data, but some of the evidence that we have been able to glean, 1 in 5 caregivers helped a grandchild in the past year. Average grandparent care is around 15 hours per week. Multi-generational households are growing, 2.4 million people now. And banks have gotten idea about that, and they are trying to collect data and how these multi-generational families function and their finances function. And the survey by RBC and BMO suggests substantial financial support from grandparents is coming. 30% assist grandchildren, 21% support adult children, and over half draw on their saving to support their children and grandchildren. And some studies have shown the impact on grandchildren, whereas far fewer have examined the effects on grandparents. And next, please. Another phenomena that is also emerging is this idea of a sandwich generation, where one person in the family is providing care to their children and perhaps their grandchildren and to their parents. And you can imagine this level of engagement in provision of care can have many health-related and social consequences. And one of that is people reported 63% reported impacting their sleep, 62% reported impacting their self-care, substantial number reported financial health, their sexual life is impacted by, their relationships are impacted by, and another level that comes into play that people are not only providing care to their family members continuously, but they're also working at the same time. And this job conflict, job-home conflict or job caregiving conflict can have major consequences in relation to trajectories of healthy aging across the board. We actually know very little about how the health and well-being of sandwich generations and what are the long-term effects. And that's one of the reasons we are looking at some of these pieces within MIRA-iGeN, and some of the data we have collected from you is already starting to address some of those questions, and you will hear some preliminary data today. Next, please. And we are very cognizant that up to now I've talked about healthy aging, but we have people who have come across all generations. And even though we are talking about the aging process, aging doesn't mean old. Aging happens the day we are born and we start to age. It is a lifelong process. So some of you might be listening to me and say, why my generation? Why are you interested in my generation? I think one of the key messages we wanted to get out is what your generation matters to aging process and therefore aging research. There is a research gap that looks at, there are very few studies that link youth health data to parents and grandparents in the same study. iGeN is trying to fill that. Unknown future effects, climate anxiety, pandemic aftermath, digital life may shape aging and your development throughout your lifetime, and what kind of impact it is going to have on your health in the future. So your generation, every generation that is included in this study is actually critical to us understanding the trajectories of healthy aging and healthy development. Next, please. And I wanted to highlight specifically why all generations matter when we are looking at it. It starts with preconception, and then the health and development happens. The dotted line and the blue lines show us some sort of The solid blue line shows if we were to be developing, most of the time we have gains as we develop in our younger ages. We reach the middle age, and after that, there is some developmental losses that start to happen. But if we start to have continuous negative impacts throughout our life, that dotted blue line shows that you start to accumulate damage over time, and that has huge consequences when you reach the later ages. The other phenomena from an intergenerational point of view is that it just doesn't stop. Here we showed the preconception, pregnancy, infancy, childhood, adolescence. As you become adolescents and you get into the reproductive age, the whole cycle in the next generation starts to happen. So this is why life course that we are trying to also study, as well as intergenerational influences, start to become really important, what happens to the future generations and their life trajectories. Next, please. So overall goals of MIRA-iGeN are to create a cohort of individuals who have 3 generations, as well as cohort of individuals without 3 or any generation. And this goes back to the earlier statistics I was trying to show, that it is not just the having multiple generations that have a positive or negative impact on aging, but if you don't have generations that you're engaged with within your family, we also want to understand what other intergenerational influences you capture from other sources and how that impacts your aging process. Investigate the interconnection among factors that influence health across the life course and generations, as I mentioned in the previous slide. Example would be that we know that the issues of obesity sometimes cluster in families. So if we were thinking about interventions for obesity, would it be better to focus across generations rather than focusing on individuals? Will we make a bigger difference in relation to diseases related to obesity, for example? And we also want to build, develop, implement, and evaluate interventions to improve the health and well-being of individuals. So MIRA-iGeN is not just about following people. As we see certain things emerge, we also want to start thinking about building interventions within the study so we can understand how we can change the trajectories of people towards a more functional and build their capacity to healthy aging process. Next, please. MIRA-iGeN is built to track health over time, study the whole person. We are not looking at body parts. Our goal is to understand the holistic, as people get older, how different aspects of their life impact them. Connect generations. And I think one of the issues we want to achieve through this project is that there is a lot of ageism. It's not only towards older people, but it's also towards younger people. If we start to link generations, how we can overcome that bias that exists in the society. And of course, drive real change through producing good evidence to improve program policies and services for individuals and families, not only here in Ontario, but across the country. Next, please. So just to give you a reminder, many of you are from these areas of Ontario. Unfortunately or fortunately, we are not doing this study across the country because of resources available to us. The initial recruited from the Greater Toronto-Hamilton corridor. And as we get more resources, we will expand to other areas. And the index person, the first person we contact in the study comes from the Hamilton-Toronto corridor. But their family members can be from anywhere around the world. We will contact them through web or telephone to collect data if they want to participate. We are still looking to recruit people into MIRA-iGeN, especially if you have your grandparents or your children or grandchildren who would want to participate in this study. We are open to receiving their information so we can reach them. To date, we have overall, across all 3 generations, recruited over 5,000 individuals. Out of those, 2,842 are single generation individuals. That means they don't have children or grandchildren, and 2,431 are intergenerational family members. Out of that, 917 have 3 generations and 1514 have 2 generations. And I just want to make a point here. You might think, oh, this is a large number and my data might not be needed. We don't want you to drop out from the study, because bigger the number we have, more confidence we have in our data. If we had more resources, we would like to increase this number to 10,000. And we will probably work towards that. But numbers are needed to answer the questions that we need to answer. And that's why your contribution to the study longitudinally over time is going to be critical for us to be able to answer the questions. Next, please. Some demographic numbers, the types of individuals we have included in the study. 26% of the population in the study represents non-European ethnic background. That is very similar to Canadian data, the census data. 69% of the people who have participated in the study are female, 31% are males. In the context of MIRA-iGeN, we are also looking at gender identity. 68% as roughly identified themselves as women, 31% as a man, and 1% gender diversity. We have a reasonably educated sample here. 62% have a bachelor or higher education among adults. We are continuing to find people from different educational strata to enrich the study, and we will continue to do so. And right now, you can see our participant age range is from 4 to 103. Next, please.
So this is just the first Mentimeter activity. Okay. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, throughout the presentation, we'll be including a few activities for you to participate in. And to respond to the questions, you can either scan the QR code that you see on the screen right now with your phone and then answer the question, or you can open another tab on your device and enter menti.com, so menti.com, followed by the number code provided on the screen. So to give us a better sense of who's joining us today, if you could just take a moment and indicate what age group you fall into. And as you're sharing your answers, I'd like to just point out that we're still actively recruiting family members, and we're really excited to see the number of child, adolescent, and young adult participants in the study grow. I'll just give you a few more minutes there or a minute or so to answer. And I realize some of you may be watching this webinar with someone else in your family, and we'll be asking about that at the in the exit questionnaire. So realize you may have a young person watching with you today too. Okay, so it's looking like most of our participants today are in the 30 to 75 age range. That's great. I see the numbers still going up, so I'll wait just a few more seconds. Just be mindful of time here. Okay. Okay. I'm just going to hand off now to Dr. Vanessa Rubeis, who will be presenting findings from the study today.
Thanks, Megan. And it's great to see such a variety of age groups joining us today. So as you may all know, iGen collects information across a wide range of determinants of health and well-being, which map onto the figure that's presented on the slide. So in this diagram shown on the slide, you can see that health is shaped by many layers. So if we start by looking at the red circle in the center, we can see individual biological determinants, including things like age or sex. If we move outwards, we see things and determinants like lifestyle factors, community networks, living and working conditions in the broader social and environmental contexts that influence health and well-being. So today we'll be presenting findings that focus in on two of these layers, which is the individual lifestyle factors and social and community networks. Next slide. So throughout the next part of the presentation, you will hear about findings from two specific projects related to factors associated with quality of life and mental health. As you saw on the previous slide, many things can influence your health and well-being, and particularly your mental health and quality of life. Using MIRA-iGeN data, we've been able to identify how caregiving roles, sources of stress, climate change, and family closeness influence your mental health and well-being. However, today we will only be focusing in on two of these aspects, which include caregiving roles and family closeness. All findings presented today use individual level data, as we have still been recruiting and collecting data from family members. However, we will be beginning these analyses at the family level in the coming months. So before we get into the findings, it's important to recognize what caregiving actually means. So caregiving refers to the unpaid support that people provide to a family member, friend, or neighbor. Caregiving takes many forms, including physical, emotional, and practical support, including things like hands-on support with daily tasks like feeding and bathing, to more complex activities like housekeeping, transportation, managing appointments, as well as supervising or monitoring the person that is being cared for. Unpaid caregiving is a significant part of the broader care system and rarely gets the attention it deserves. Despite its essential role, it's frequently undervalued, with unpaid caregiving estimated to be valued at $97 billion. In MIRA-iGeN, we found that 40% of participants aged 18 and older, which equates to about 2 in 5 adults, are providing care to at least one person in their life. Next slide. So caregiving is much more complex and nuanced than a simple yes or no question. In fact, many caregivers are supporting more than one person, and the relationship between caregiver and care recipient varies greatly and often goes beyond families. Within iGen, we identified 5 distinct groups of caregivers based on who they are caring for. So starting with the gray box, we've identified a group that provides within-generation caregiving, and this includes people who are providing care for someone in their generation, such as a spouse, a neighbor, or a friend. The next group we identified is represented in the orange box, which is upward caregiving, which is when a person is caring for an older generation, such as a parent or a grandparent. The next generation group that we identified is downward caregiving, which is when a person is caring for a younger generation, such as a child or a grandchild. In green, we see the next group, which is bidirectional caregiving, which is when a person is caring for both upward and downward generations at the same time. So for example, this would be when someone is supporting an aging parent while also providing care to a child. The final group we identified is combined caregiving, which involves generational care in multiple directions, as well as within generation care at the same time. So the most common caregiving type in our sample is downward caregiving, with 15% of caregivers reporting this type of caregiving. So once again, this often includes caring for a child or a grandchild. But with that being said, we see meaningful proportions across all the other groups as well. So starting within caregiving, we see about 8% of people providing this type of care, 8% of people providing upward care to older family members, 5% of people providing bidirectional care, and 3% of people in the combined caregiving group. So even though some of these proportions may seem small, they represent caregivers carrying some of the most complex and demanding responsibilities. Next slide. So now on this slide, we see how caregiving varies across age groups and between males and females within the study. Across iGen, the majority of people who reported being a caregiver were female. On the left side of the slide in orange, you can see the proportion of female caregivers across all the age groups above the age of 18. So we see the highest proportion in midlife from ages 35 to 54, with a peak at ages 35 to 44, where about 72% of people within this age group reported being a caregiver. On the right side in green, the male caregivers follow a similar pattern. Caregiving is also highest in midlife, peaking at ages 45 to 54, where 53% of people in this age group reported being a caregiver. So for both sexes, midlife is the peak caregiving period, but females consistently carry a higher caregiving burden across nearly the entire life course. However, there was one notable exception in the oldest age group, where we see that among males aged 75 years and older, 25% reported being a caregiver compared to 18% of females. So looking across the life course, caregiving doesn't look the same at every life stage. Who you care for and how you provide care shifts throughout the life course. We see in early life, or in early adulthood, most caregiving is directed downward. But what is important to note is that providing care for others begins early in life and is not just prevalent for older adults. The peak complexity hits at ages 45 to 54, which is also known as the sandwich generation. This is where people are being pulled in multiple directions at once. So we see that downward care is still present, upward care for aging parents is rising, and bidirectional caregiving peaks. So this generation or this group is typically juggling the most, often with competing demands on their time, energy, and resources. Moving into the later years, roles shift again. So we see from 55 onward, care increasingly moves upward towards aging parents, and then within the generations to spouses, friends, and neighbors. And importantly, we also see that caregiving doesn't stop even in the oldest age group. So among those who were 75 years and older, a meaningful proportion of this group are still providing care to those around them. So our data shows a clear link between caregiving and quality of life. Caregivers report significantly worse mental health-related quality of life compared to non-caregivers. Those providing bidirectional care, which includes caring for both older and younger generations at once, typically experience the greatest impact. This is important, and it's exactly why your participation in the study matters. By sharing your experiences through MIRA-iGeN, you're helping build the evidence base for interventions and policies that support caregivers across Canada. So now I will hand it over to Divya, who will continue sharing findings from the study. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. So building on the findings that Vanessa just shared about caregiving and practical support, I wanted to shift our focus to another important aspect of family relationships, which is emotional closeness. And so while caregiving and practical support tell us something about what family members do for one another, emotional closeness tells us something about how people actually feel about those relationships. So whether they feel connected, cared for, supported, and valued. And we know that this is important because family relationships are often some of the most meaningful social connections that we have throughout our lives. And so strong emotional bonds can provide this sense of belonging and stability and support during both positive and during challenging times. In iGeN, emotional closeness is captured, or different aspects of emotional closeness or relationship quality are captured. And as we can see here, we asked about feelings of care and affection, emotional connection, happiness within the relationship, and overall relationship quality. And so participants were asked about how emotionally close they currently felt to their father, mother, son, and daughter. And if someone had more than one father, mother, son, and daughter, then they answered the questions in relation to the parent or the child they felt the closest to. So the family member that they report on may or may not necessarily be another participant in this study. So with that in mind, we can see here what emotional closeness looks like among our middle-aged and older participants. And I do want to point out that we collected data from all adult participants, but the results I'm presenting here focus on participants aged 45 years and older. And this is a particularly interesting stage of life because many people are maintaining relationships with both aging parents as well as their children, while they themselves are also navigating their own transitions related to work or retirement, caregiving responsibilities, and health concerns. What I also want to point out about this work is that we looked at mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters separately rather than combining them into a single parent or child category. And this level of detail is not always available in large studies. And so having this data really allows us to better understand how different family relationships are experienced emotionally. If you look at the results here, one thing that immediately stood out to us is just how high emotional connection or closeness is across family relationships. So among participants with a living father, about 69% reported feeling emotionally close to him. For mothers, that number was even higher at 80%. And so in other words, we see that participants were somewhat more likely to report feeling close to their mother than their father. And this pattern is consistent with what we've seen previously in research, and it could reflect differences in caregiving roles or in communication styles, or even just emotional expression between mothers and fathers. When we look at relationship with children, emotional closeness was even more common. So roughly 9 out of 10 participants reported emotional bonds with their children. And so building on these findings, we then examined whether emotional closeness was associated with mental health, particularly depressive symptoms. Next slide, please. So what we see here is a fairly clear pattern. Individuals who reported feeling emotionally close to both parents reported the lowest levels of depression at about 24%. What's interesting is that the apparent benefit is not limited to having close relationships with both parents. Even being emotionally close to one parent was associated with lower levels of depression. So among those who reported being close only to their father, 34% reported depressive symptoms, while among those who were close only to their mother, 39% reported depressive symptoms. In contrast, we see higher levels of depressive symptoms among those who have weaker emotional ties to both their parents at 45%. And so, of course, not everyone has the opportunity to maintain emotionally close relationships with their parents. And I think that for these findings really just highlight the importance of creating opportunities to strengthen intergenerational communication and connection within families. But it also really highlights the need to ensure that individuals have access to other meaningful sources of social and emotional support that can promote their mental well-being. Next slide, please. And so next we examined whether the patterns that we saw on the previous slide actually remained consistent even after we accounted for differences in age, sex, or social circumstances and physical health conditions and so on. And what we see is that the overall pattern did actually remain quite similar. Again, one finding that particularly stood out was the role of father-child closeness. So compared to individuals who were not emotionally close to their father, those who reported being emotionally close to their father had 55% lower likelihood of experiencing depressive symptoms. And we often tend to think about mothers as a primary emotional relationship within families. But these results really also suggest that emotionally close relationship with fathers is also equally important and has implications for mental health in later life. That being said, the lowest likelihood of depressive symptoms was observed among participants who reported being emotionally close to both their parents. These individuals had about 61% lower chance of depression compared to those who were not close to either of their parents. And we observed a similar pattern among participants with children. So among those who had both a son and a daughter, so children of both sex, individuals who reported being emotionally close to both children had about 55% lower likelihood of depressive symptoms. And so together, these findings really suggest that emotionally close family relationships, particularly across multiple intergenerational ties, are associated with better mental health in midlife and in older adulthood. And one thing that we are especially excited about moving forward is that since iGen includes family members who are also participating in the study themselves, we will be able to move beyond this 1%'s perception of the relationship and examine emotional closeness from both sides of the parent-child relationship. So those analyses are still underway, but that will give us this unique opportunity to better understand how intergenerational relationships influence health and well-being across all generations. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Divya. Okay, so we have another activity for you to sort of build on Divya's presentation and lead us into Dr. Gonzalez's slides. If you could just take a minute and share with us who or what you turn to for when you need support. You'll see that a word cloud will generate based on the responses from everyone. So you have the option to enter up to 3 answers, and you can enter the same thing multiple times if something is particularly important. And as the answers come in, you'll notice some of the words will grow larger as those answers are entered more. So I'll give you a moment to share your responses. Okay. So friends, I see friends are important, spouse, mom, therapist, books, food. Okay. Spouse. There's some different ones in there as well. We have chaplain, being outside, nature, neighbors, puzzles, colleagues. Those are all great. Thank you very much. I'll just let it go for a few more seconds there. Okay, so the point of this activity is just to highlight the many different sources of support that people can turn to throughout their lives, and that those supports aren't always family members. There are other connections that are important and can influence our health and well-being and quality of life in really meaningful ways. So thank you for sharing your answers. I'm just going to hand off to Dr. Gonzalez now.
Great. Thank you, Megan. And thank you, everyone, for attending today. I'm just going to sort of finish off the formal presentation today, really by connecting some of the presentations today and the groundwork that Parminder laid about the context of iGen and why iGen is important to, existing literature and what other research is finding and where we're hoping to go from here. So really, this slide is capturing what the larger body of research is telling us, that social connection is really a fundamental driver of health. So it's not just something that's nice to have. And, we saw on the Mentimeter slide from everyone's responses that social connection might come from different people. Okay, well, I'll continue just to talk to it, and then when the slide pops up, you'll just see the pretty visual to my words. So, really going back to the Mentimeter findings, these social connections might come from a variety of people and sources, like even people were talking about just finding pleasure in nature and engaging in activities. There is research that shows that social connection does protect our health. There was a very large review that was done in 2015 that involved sort of collating data from over 3.4 million people that really was showing that weaker social ties were associated with a 29% higher risk of premature death. And here's the finding that really stops people. I don't know if people have seen this on social media or not, but that lacking social connection can be as harmful to your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That's what this research review was sort of showing. And what's interesting about that is that we have entire public health campaigns around smoking. So research, about smoking and how it's connected to health. Okay, I can see our slides are back, so I'll just wait. Thank you, Megan. Okay, so I was talking about how social connection protects health. And we know that there are public health campaigns in terms of all sorts of different kinds of healthy habits, but at the same time, we should be treating loneliness and social isolation with the same kind of public health emergency as some of these other well-known health factors are treated. And this really came to light in a 2023 U.S. Surgeon General's report, where in the report, he stated that loneliness and isolation really can carry a number of health risks and that are even comparable to obesity. So again, this isn't just a fringe concern, that it's a major public health issue that we should be addressing. At the bottom right-hand part of the slide in green, it's not just about having people around, it's about the quality of the connections that we make. And I think that this came out in some of the findings that Divya was presenting from MIRA-iGeN, that supportive relationships, especially across generations, can be protective for mental health throughout the life course, but also for adolescence and in older adulthood. And finally, at the bottom left-hand corner, better mental health and quality of life is also associated with stronger ties across the entire lifespan. So right from young adults all the way through to older ages. So next slide, please. Thank you. So that last slide was sort of telling us why connections matter. And this one is really showing us how it shows up in our bodies and our mind and in our communities. And really the evidence represented on this slide, I'm not going to go through it in detail, but really shows that it spans every stage of life and every dimension of health. So strong relationships help protect your brain, they help protect your heart, your ability to manage chronic illness like diabetes and hypertension. And these effects aren't small. So we're talking about a 32% lower stroke risk and up to 50% of reduced dementia risk that's associated with strong social connections. In the middle row, the connections are again associated with fewer mental health issues. We see this in our biology as well, so it's associated with stronger immune systems and better outcomes for kids at school. And then finally, at the bottom row, it shows that social connections can even have an impact on your economic life. So people with strong community ties report better overall health, better community involvement, which actually can increase your chances of finding employment. So really, the bottom line message or the underlying message of all of this is that strong connections don't just feel good, they're really important for our health. So they help us live longer and healthier and happier lives. Next slide, please. So this last slide is sort of bringing together both Divya and Vanessa's presentations, but also expanding what MIRA-iGeN is beyond just family relationships. So you don't need to live in a multi-generational household or even have family close by to be able to experience the benefits of an intergenerational connection. So the evidence on the left, in the red boxes, are really telling us three important things. First, that quality matters more than kinship. So health benefits can come from any type of supportive relationship. It doesn't have to be biological ties. Second is that chosen relationships count. So this means that mentors, neighbors, colleagues, friends, people we're talking about, ministers, really provide similar benefits. And finally, that contact is really the active ingredient. It's the regular interaction and that kind of social piece of it that is really important, because those kinds of social ingredients help us build trust, reduce prejudice, and supports overall well-being. Again, the center of the slide shows us how many different forms that this can take, and that these are already everyday roles that not only we receive support from, but that we are actively engaged in ourselves. And that's really the point of the final panel on the right-hand side in green. That if you look through this list, if you've had a mentor or learned from someone older or younger, or supported someone from really across any walk of life or any generation, or worried about an aging loved one, then these findings are really important to you. And really, social connection is at the core of us being human, and something that we've all experienced in some way. Next slide.
So this is the last Mentimeter. I hope it doesn't throw a wrench in things again. Here we go. So this is before we head into the final section of the webinar, if you could just select from the options provided, the things that matter most for you for your health and well-being. And I think you can select up to 5. I'm not sure if it's, there we go. And I apologize in advance if I have to exit and go back in should it freeze up again. So connection to family and friends, financial security, keeping physically active, looks like connection to family and friends, financial security, and access to good health care, and keeping physically active are important. Okay, just in the keeping an eye on our time here. Thank you for taking part in that. I'm just gonna hopefully exit out of here to the next slide. No, I'm not. Okay, 1 second.
Thanks, Megan. And thank you everyone for your responses. And I could see that, the connection piece is certainly rising to the top, but things like financial security and other sources of stress, everyday stressors that we all experience, are certainly important to people as well. And this is all data that we collect in MIRA-iGeN, and really we only reported a small snapshot of the data today, but these are all things that we know are important to people, and that we're also looking at in terms of the data and how it relates to health and well-being across the lifespan. So in these last few minutes, I really just wanted to quickly sort of go over where we are planning as a research team of going from here, but also that your input is incredibly important as well. So next slide, please. So again, based on our preliminary research findings and feedback that we've had, and other members of the research team, as Parminder mentioned earlier, we have a much larger research team, not just the people who are presenting today. We have added some new research modules, which some of you probably have not responded to yet because these are fairly new. We're looking at things like climate and health, and brain health, as Megan had mentioned. Louise Lafortune, who's a member of our team, is leading that work. Girls and women's health, and boys and men's health. as well as more family members enroll and we build up the intergenerational component, we will be looking at across generations as well as within generations. And we are very, very interested in thinking about and looking at interventions for health as well that are across the lifespan. Next slide, please. So this is really sort of an overall sort of wrap-up slide that sort of summarizes all of the findings today, that really our well-being is built through our relationships and the communities that are around us. And really the three pillars that are reflected below on the slide sort of highlight what evidence keeps telling us. So the people who care for us and about us really shape our well-being in very powerful ways. And that includes supporting caregivers themselves, as Vanessa's research is highlighting. And that close and warm relationships at any age are one of the strongest buffers that we have in terms of our well-being. And this is exactly why iGen exists, because we are really uniquely positioned to study these kinds of connections across generations, but also external connections as well. And again, as we continue to actively recruit other generations, and we're open to hearing from people in terms of what's important for you, we really want to make the science and all the information that we're collecting from you actionable. Next slide, please. So this is Megan's information in terms of, I know that there were some questions in the chat or the Q&A already about asking how people could share information about the study, or how they could approach their family members. I would just recommend really reaching out to Megan in terms of supporting that in the future. Next slide, please. This is a QR code. If people are interested, the McMaster Optimal Aging portal, the website is also listed here, has a lot of really, really amazing evidence-based resources across a domain and a wealth and breadth of topics. So I really recommend people going to look at this portal if you're interested in more information. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. I don't know if that's it. If we have time for some questions, or if Megan, are you fielding the Q&A? But I really want to thank all of the participants across all generations and all of the staff that make really all of this research possible, and for your attention at 4 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon when it's like muggy outside. I appreciate everyone coming to the webinar, so thank you.
Okay, I think Jacqueline has the questions. I'm not sure if she's been releasing them to be answered throughout the presentation.
Megan, there were a couple of questions in the chat.
Okay.
Maybe I can.
Sorry, there's also a Q&A box at the bottom of your toolbar, Megan. There's currently 9 questions in there if you guys wanted to go through that.
Yeah. I think let me deal with the comments from the chat. And one was that one comment I saw quickly, that these are correlation, not causal. You're absolutely right. These are our cross-sectional data. That's one of the reasons we are collecting these data over time, so we can actually try to find some causal associations still from our data. And that's why we have embedded opportunity for embedding intervention study, the things that we find from observational, then we can do intervention study to see whether it makes a difference or not. So there are multitudes of ways we are looking at causality within our study. So another comment was that it is great to see the relationships matter, quality of relationships matter, but at the same time, not all relationships are healthy. Issues related to abuse or elder abuse become important, and all those areas are being captured in the context of iGen. And as some of these areas emerge, we would be adding that to the data collection protocols in the future. There was one comment related to caregiving. I think that's really critical to understand. There is a caregiving that happens in the process of living, which we accept as acceptable. This is what we provide care to the children, take them to school, feed them, and do other things, and so on and so forth. When we talk about caregiving burden, we are talking about when your life is completely consumed by that process and how that process actually impacts your health. Example would be if you have ever provided a care to a person with a dementia, it is a 24/7 job that you cannot quit. And that data, results, studies after studies has shown what kind of stressors and burden that can put on the care provider. And that's why it is actually not a very good word to use, caregiver burden, because caregiving is also a positive as well as a negative experience. So we are very cognizant of that. And as we analyze more data, we will be looking at positive aspects of caregiving and not only the negative consequences of it. I don't know what other questions are maybe Andrea or Divya and others want to take. There was one question on findings are well and good, but how do you treat loneliness and isolation? Did somebody want to take that on?
Sorry, I'm trying to address some of them in the chat.
Maybe you want me to take that one on?
Yeah, that would be good.
So I think it is a good question that yes, loneliness and isolation is an issue, but how do we deal with it? Not everybody wants to be engaged. And I think there is also a bit of a difference that we have to understand, that if you're socially isolated, that doesn't mean you're lonely. Some people are loners by choice and they function quite well. When we talk about loneliness, when you actually, your body experiences it as a stress, that's one thing. There's a lot of intervention work that is going on here at McMaster as part of our McMaster Institute of Research and Aging. We have studies that just recently finished where we are looking at different types of interventions that can enhance social engagement. And it is creating opportunity for social engagement. Somebody might be interested in physical activity. Rather than doing physical activity alone, you try to arrange activities that might be in a group. Or somebody likes to cook and eat, and how do we create that as a vehicle for social engagement? And communities matter in this case. Age-friendly communities matter. So there are quite a bit of a literature emerging that how can we enhance connections that benefits people. But at the end of the day, people have to have a desire to make connections. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Just a quick answer to that question.
I'm just seeing we're over our time. It's 5:04. If there aren't any other questions, thank you everyone for joining us today. It was great to have a chance to share some of our findings with you and have a chance to connect with you. And yeah, that's it for today. Thank you. And and I think people are asking about the recording as well.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that. And then we will address any other questions and send out responses as well. Sorry,
yes. Yeah, anyone that didn't get an opportunity to have their question answered today, please feel free to email me. And if I can't answer your question, I can always forward it along to the right person. Jacqueline's already mentioned as well in the chat that the recording will be available, and that will be made available on our website next week. And Jacqueline will be kind enough to edit it, so you will never see the technological issues we had in the middle. But anyway, thank you very much for being here today. Okay, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you.